We give the future to the winds. Overview. Each season, the civil service prepares a summary of the Empire's relationship with foreign nations, based on the communications received from their ambassador, along with any useful intelligence gathered from other sources. While the Senate and the other houses of imperial power may respond to these offers, it is important to note that it is the appropriate ambassador that the foreign power will expect to hear from. Their communication with the foreign power is the primary element that will determine the tenor of any response. The lifeblood of Farad'n is trade, but it is also a country of canny wizards, courageous warriors, and proud, albeit heretical, priests. They currently do not share a border with the Empire, lying beyond the Jotun and the Iron Confederacy, but that does not stop them from sending their caravans to imperial markets despite the high tariffs they must pay to pass through the lands between. Diplomatic relations between the Court of the Five Winds and the Imperial Senate are changeable, warm one moment and cool the next, but it has never come to open warfare. Right now, Farad'n is squeezed between two competing interests, the Empire on one side and the angry plenum of the Asavean archipelago on the other, and they must walk a knife edge between the two powerful nations. The Farad'n ambassador to the Empire is Mistress Singwa Caradandra. Mistress Singwa advises the Court of the Five Winds on all diplomatic matters, and speaks on their behalf to foreign ambassadors. Her attitude to the Empire appears to be cool, but professional, and heavily informed by the wishes of the liege and their court, who seek more opportunities to trade with the Empire. Flames and faith. The Asavean priesthood continues to make inroads in Farad'n despite assistance from the Imperial Synod. A plan has been proposed to create a site of spiritual power dedicated to the Five Flames. The Farad'n priests involved ask the gatekeepers for a dose of precious true liao. Following the spring equinox, a quiet coalition of Farad'n priestly families made a covert approach to the Imperial Synod. Concerned about Asavean efforts to syncretize their gods with the Five Nations, roughly analogous to the Imperial understanding of courage, vengeance, loyalty, pride, and prosperity, they asked their opposite numbers in the Virtue Assemblies to offer their aid. The Synod response was positive, but the attempt ultimately failed. Despite Ambassador Ebenezer's positivity, the families believe the situation is worsening. Slower than it might have been without Imperial involvement, but the Asaveans are still gaining ground. Their proselytizers remain civil and polite on the surface, but their efforts are insidious. Those who deal with Asavean merchants are encouraged to participate in religious ceremonies or visit the small number of shrines that have grown up around the nation. There are obvious advantages to Farad'n merchants in paying lip service to their golden-handed god of trade, and it is unfortunately a short step from lip service to viewing Lord Isaumaus de Oro and the Flame of Prosperity as being interchangeable. The longer it goes on, the more the Asavean priests dig their claws into Farad'n society. Now, Mistress Caradraga passes on another message from the priestly families, again with an element of the covert about it. A very well-respected priest of the Five Flames named Mbuga Talagar of the Silver Tree has considered the matter at length and has another request for the Imperial Synod. They are aware that the gatekeepers of the Empire are responsible for distributing the precious true liao, a substance that can be used to enact miracles of spiritual power. Farad'n itself has no access to this substance. Its capabilities are somewhat legendary among the faithful of the Five Flames. Almost all durable auras in the nation are the result of spontaneous manifestations. The Asavean priests, however, have nothing approaching the spiritual ceremonies that followers of the Five Flames and the Way can create. Bura Talagar proposes to create a true consecration at the Temple of the High Flames, the most prestigious seat of the Farad'n faith, using the ceremony of the Flames of Honor. The other priestly families broadly agree that this will draw pilgrims from across Farad'n and provide a potent anchor to their beliefs against the attack of the Asaveans. Unfortunately, none of the priests have true liao, unless someone is prepared to give it to them. Another major stumbling block. Over and above the problem of persuading the Empire to part with a dose of this precious substance, is that it is illegal for Imperial citizens to trade True Liao to anyone who is not an Imperial citizen. As such, they literally cannot offer anything in return for this gift, and they can only accept it from the gatekeepers, who would simply indicate that they intend to distribute it to Bura Talagar, and the civil service would arrange for it to be delivered on their behalf. Or rather, they can only accept it legally from the gatekeepers. If a private individual were to acquire a dose and use a ritual such as ethereal courier to dispatch it to Bura, they would be able to use it for the consecration regardless of imperial law. The civil service are quick to point out that this would be a serious crime if any imperial citizen were to consider doing so. It would be quite hard to conceal the crime has taken place, given that the whole point of the concentration is that it become common knowledge, and even though Bura and their compatriots would of course refuse to give up the name of a mysterious benefactor, there are only so many doses of True Liao in the Empire, and it is unlikely that one would be provided by anyone else with access. The window of opportunity for this plan is quite narrow. Bura believes it would be most effective as part of the grand celebrations that take place each year at the end of the year in Farad'n. If the dose has not reached them before the start of the winter solstice, it will be too late to have a meaningful impact. Consecration will still go ahead, but its effects will be significantly reduced. The Hills of Rhinos. The Farad'n have a peace treaty with the Jotun that is due to be renegotiated during the summer solstice 388 YE. Unless the situation changes significantly, the Farad'n will seek to maintain the peace treaty with the Jotun. The Farad'n have a tumultuous relationship with several of their other immediate neighbours, especially the Jotun. Parts of their territory are under the control of that barbarian nation, and without the historic aid of the Empire, it could have been much worse. They have maintained a state of peace with the Jotun for nearly 10 years now, through a series of treaties that allow them to trade with the Empire, but at the cost of punitive tithes given to the Jotun and Lysambrian Jotun Jarls of Rhinos. There was significant excitement when the news reached the Court of Five Winds that the Empire had invaded the Lysambrian Hills, but sadly this came to nothing when the Imperial Military Council withdrew its armies following the spring equinox. Ambassador Ebenezer has suggested that the military situation in Rhinos wasn't favourable, and urged Mistress Cadrauga to consider what it would take to form a better treaty between our virtuous peoples. In response, the Farad'n ambassador has laid out the reality of the situation. Talk of a prosperity pact is all very well, but Farad'n cannot afford to go to war with the Jotun, and the Jotun would prefer to focus their efforts on fighting the Empire at this time. Next year, in summer 388 YE, the existing treaty between Farad'n and the Jotun is due to be renegotiated, and the Liege of the Five Winds has instructed their diplomats to ensure that the peace continues, especially given the growing turbulence between the nation caused by the twin pressures of Asavea and the Empire. It is Mistress Caradraga's opinion that, given the current circumstances, it seems likely that the peace treaty will continue for at least another 2 years. As long as it is in place, Farad'n cannot offer direct military support to the Empire in fighting the Jotun. If it fails, then the Farad'n likewise would not be able to spare any martial support to the Empire, as they would be fighting the Jotun. Indeed, it is likely that they would ask the Empire for aid in securing their borders. She does let slip, however, that there is another possibility on the table. Representatives of the Iron Confederacy have been in touch with Mistress Caradraga to discuss, in theoretical terms, the possibility of a Serrani invasion of Rhinos. They are apparently itching to wipe out the Lysambrian sects once and for all, regardless of who their allies are. They've already offered quite favourable deals to the Farad'n if they offer covert support to their efforts. And in the candid opinion of Mistress Caradraga, this might represent a much more favourable outcome to her people than waiting on the Empire. The civil service note again, in the wake of the Farad'n ambassador's words, that one of the few things allowing Farad'n to maintain their strange peace with the Jotun is that the Western barbarians are focusing their attention on the Empire. The treaty the High Liege of the Five Winds relies on will not last long if the Empire achieves peace with the Orcs. Yaks and cheese. A statement of principle in the Marcher Assembly has been enthusiastically received by the Hakrandra family. They have proposed to pay some of the white granite cost should Yakholm Grange be commissioned. The statement has allayed fears of further disruption and attracted interest from some Farad'n priests. Following the visit of the Hakrandra to the Marches last season, enthusiasm for Yakholm Grange remains high among the families and their allies. Cutullin Hakrandra has sent personal thanks to Ambassador Ebenezer for speaking on behalf of his family to the Marcher Assembly, and to Sister Meredith for her kind words and winning the friars and monks of her nation around. As intimated last season, the statement of principle upheld by the Marcher Assembly has gone some way towards mollifying those in the Marches concerned about a repeat of the Moonwater Hall fiasco. News of it has also encouraged the Hakrandra that any lingering animosity truly has been buried. As such, the Hakrandra family has put its hands in its pockets and proposes to provide 15 wains of white granite and 15 crowns towards the labour costs of Yakholm Grange should it be commissioned. Cutullin Hakrandra also sends a basket of moon cheese to the ambassador, asking them to pass the goods along to Sister Meredith and her fellow friars and monks as a sincere sign of thanks for their work in this matter. Out of character note: a small amount of moon cheese has been left with the civil service at the hub for collection by the ambassador to distribute as appropriate to those involved. The statement has more immediate effects, reducing the likelihood of problems while the Grange is being built. The Hakrandra also respond enthusiastically to Ambassador Ebenezer's suggestion that if any problems do occur, they can simply be talked out by a combination of Marchers and Farad'n representatives, presumably rather than one side or the other simply burning everything down. If there is a downside to this detente, it is that if any trouble does erupt between the Farad'n and the Marcher farmers, and proves insurmountable, people on both sides are likely to end up pointing the finger at the Assembly for saying everything would be fine. On a final note, apparently, the possibility presented by the Assembly that there may be chances to discuss matters of faith with the Marcher priests has caused some interest in Farad'n. There are few among those who would dedicate themselves to the Five Flames who have an interest in visiting the Marches once Yakholm Grange is completed, especially among those who particularly follow the teachings of the Flames analogous to imperial prosperity, pride, and loyalty, with an intention of enjoying Marcher ale and cheese and seeing if it's all it's cracked up to be. Great Hall of Fabric Arts. There is an interest in Farad'n relating to the Great Hall of Fabric Arts in Delev. While discussing plans for the Firewind Market in Holberg, some of the Farad'n expressed an interest in trading with the people of the evil forests of Varushka, with an eye towards both the wealth of natural materials that grow there, but also their fine cloth and embroidery. With the news of the completion of the Great Hall of Fabric Arts in Delev, that interest has solidified further. An invitation passed along from the overseer of Westward Road, Alexandra Ivanova Cherenkov, to Farad'n merchants, has been eagerly received in some quarters. Not long after the summer solstice, a caravan of Farad'n arrive in Delev to take a proper look at both the city and the Hall of Fabric Arts. The contingent represents the Nekmelchida family, who make their money from trade in fine cloth and clothing, and a small contingent from the Guild of the Blue Silk Scarf, a wizard family who specialize in fine magical garb, who have had some dealings with the Empire before. While the main focus of the Farad'n approach remains on Holberg, the Nekmelchida and the Blue Scarf feel they likely have more in common with the weavers of Varushka and the merchants of Delev, especially after they have an opportunity to tour the Great Hall and speak to the weavers. Initial responses are very positive, but there are some concerns about the danger of Varushka and its carnivorous geography, as one Nekmelchida puts it. There is also the question of whether the city has sufficient draw for the merchants the two Farad'n groups would want to deal with. Some discussion of the plans to build a great market at Delev, put together as the result of the appraisal from earlier in the year, mollify these concerns to a degree. The idea of having a quarter as part of this ambiguous trading hub appeals, but without the great market, there is some concern about the viability of establishing such an enclave. In the end, the Nekmelchida regretfully indicate that until the great market or something similar is built, they will not seek an opportunity to establish close ties with Delev. Arts of the Loom. The Blue Silk Scarf Guild are interested in establishing a presence in Delev. The Guild of the Blue Silk Scarf, however, are significantly more interested. They are aware that Varushka has a strong magical tradition, and that their wares might well be of interest to both Volhov and Kabbalists. They also tend to deal in small numbers of valuable goods, rather than the kind of bulk transport of cloth investments the Nekmelkaida specialize in. As such, their representatives make a separate approach to the Great Hall of Fabric Arts. They propose securing a small base of operations within the walls of Delev, staffed by members of the guild. They can work their craft in Varushka as easily as they can back home, and indeed access cheap materials such as dragonbone, iridescent gloaming, beggar's lie, and both orichalcum and welt silver are very appealing. A permanent address would also allow them to bring in and remove valuable goods, without the risk of transporting materials through the Lysambrian hills, using a ritual they call the Celestial Caravan, which on the surface appears similar to the ritual known in Urizen lore as Ethereal Courier. Such a base will require some work, and a commission to ensure all the appropriate permissions are secured. The entire thing would cost around 20 wains, but the Blue Silk Scarf are enthusiastic enough to pay part of the cost themselves, specifically the mithril their proposal requires. The Varushkans would need to pay the 12 wains of weirwood their plan requires, while the Faradin provide the 8 wains of mithril to create looms, artisan tools, and assorted secure vaults in which to store their materials. It would create a title, Blue Silk Weaver, who would be responsible for smoothing over any problems that might arise between the Faradin wizard artisans and Imperial citizens, and in return could purchase up to 3 pieces of magical garb each season. The commission would create a new title unless the Senate chose to create a title with responsibility for overseeing the Great Hall of Fabric Arts specifically. In this case, the Faradin wizards would deal with them directly. Indeed, if the Senate later created such a title, the Faradin would expect the Blue Silk Weaver to be rolled into that title. There is one caveat the civil service has identified. A Faradin presence in Delev, especially the presence of members of a wizard family who explicitly make clothing of interest to magicians, would certainly lead to interest from the Thule. Mistress Karadraga has expressed interest in securing contact with the Thule, and such contact would not help but be facilitated in Delev, given the presence of the Delev market and its regular visitors from Otkadov. The richest wines. The Faradin have an interest in trading with Dawn. There is some interest in a proposal that a market in the Barrens might be profitable, but also questions to be answered. After the summer solstice, Mistress Karadraga received interesting missives from Earl Seraphine de Seroy and Lady Cassandra de Creed, encouraging Faradin interest in Dornish markets. A particularly compelling case was made by Earl Seraphine for establishing a trading enclave in the Barrens. In particular, the idea that any Faradin market here would not be a guest among many, but rather would be the first, with space to shape your own trade without opposition or interference, is intriguing. The proposal suggested that Saltmarsh might be ideal due to the Dornish intention to establish a port there, but Mistress Karadraga finds that quality makes it less appealing to the seafaring nation. Rather, they would seem more interested in the opportunities presented in the west of the territory, ideally in Dawnguard, Murderdale, and the Carmine Fields. Faradin interest in Dornish wine is well known, as is their appetite for other luxuries provided by the nation. The offer of Baronsbury wine is especially appealing. An invitation for Mistress Karadraka to send a representative to join Seraphine and Lady Gwendolina de Seroy, Senator of the Barons, at Anvil to discuss matters further, leads to nothing. But the Faradin ambassador has an alternate proposal at this stage. As previously discussed, Faradin merchants are keen to establish a market in Dawn dedicated to the purchase and perhaps sale of fine wines and luxury goods. However, the merchants of the nation are already in negotiation with the burghers of Holberg to establish a major enclave there. Presuming that this is successful, Faradin merchants would have to pass through Astolat and Semaholm, where they would be able to trade for the goods they want. As Mistress Karadraga understands it, the Barrens is still something of a wild frontier, and while there are clearly opportunities for profit in that kind of environment, they are a little different to those available in more established areas. Surely it would make more sense for Farad'n and Dawn to cooperate on the establishment of a market in prosperous Astolat or Semaholm, along the planned Farad'n Trail that extend their journey into the Wild Barrens. Not all the Farad'n merchant families are so conservative, however. Mistress Karadraga informs the ambassador that a small contingent of Sansar family explorer merchants intend to visit Anvil during the autumn equinox to speak with the people of the Barrens about potential trade connections. Winds blow eastward. 3 merchants of the Sansar family will be attending Anvil at 10:15 in the morning on Sunday. They intend to visit the people of Dawn to discuss opportunities for economic cooperation. There is a saying in Farad'n: the truest foundations are built on a foundation of gold. Diplomats, warriors, priests and wizards live among them, but at their heart the people of Farad'n are merchants. As such, a pair of unexpected offers from Lady Cassandra Ducreed and Earl Seraphine de Saroy to discuss trade enclave in the distant nation of Dawn are received with a great deal of cheer. Most people in Farad'n think of the Dornish as a nation of knights and witches, more concerned with great battles and epic stories than with sound economics. They are not entirely surprised, however. As many point out, it takes a lot of very sober and sensible merchants to feed and clothe so many glory seekers. Whatever the case, money talks, and can be heard over surprisingly long distances by those willing to listen. The Sansar family are known for being more tolerant of risk than many among their people. A distant enclave on the opposite side of the Empire is no small investment of time and resources, but there are already those seeking to profit from the vast metropolis of Holberg, and other merchants are keen not to fall behind. As such, the Sansar have assembled a small consortium of mercantile families to potentially go in with them on a venture to Dawn. Any such partnership will need more details to begin with. What do the people of Dawn have to sell to their friends in Farad'n? Mention has been made of the unique Baron's berries. Are they medicinal, recreational, magical? Some combination of the above? What would the people of Dawn be most interested in purchasing in return? Where would any potential trading enclaves be built? These matters could be hashed out by winged messengers, but there is no substitute for looking a potential business partner in the eye. As such, 3 cousins of the Sansar family will be attending Anvil at 10:15 on Sunday, whence they intend to go to the Dornish camp to receive hospitality and hash out potential details. Everything will need to be confirmed within each nation's representative civil service to get the exact numbers straight. But if all goes well, the outline of a deal could be drawn right there in Anvil. The Sansar are, of course, primarily there to speak with the people of Dawn, and will not disrespect their hosts by turning their eyes away to other projects. However, if members of other nations were to express a polite interest in future cooperation, well, opportunity is a dish that curdles quickly. It would be foolish not to at least hear anyone else out, even if no final decision would be made. Ashes on the breeze. The religious extremists, known as the Cinders, are suspiciously quiet. Last season, the Liege of the Five Winds publicly condemned the violent ultra-orthodox sect known as the Cinders for making an attempt on the life of an imperial citizen who had done them no wrong. Many across the nation rightly joined in such a condemnation, and the Cinders were, as predicted, driven underground. Some arrests were made, but ultimately the result was silence. Eerie silence. There have been no retaliatory strikes, no defiant public statements. Nothing. Gossip around the court of the Five Winds paints the Liege's mood around this issue as fretful. If there is a wasp in the room, they are quoted as saying, "I would rather be able to see where it is before it stings me." Perhaps the wasp has quietly died somewhere out of sight, or perhaps it simply waits for the opportune moment to strike. For now, nobody knows.